드린 배제 돈다치 돈다데나 돈다 제마 돈다 다 냐마 뒤는라 너무 주게 된다 공 조진 전에 솔배기면도 한데라나 공기 나사가 자르게 상관을 되시나.
So for the next week or so, for the next 7 days, Lama Drukgyal Tendar will not be able to come to this class because he has to be part of the Drukchen. And so Khenpo says that he is the substitute teacher for that time.
나서 아니 먼저 나트와 카카샤지도 딜렌데 칼레지는 슈기.
And we have received a few questions from yesterday, and I would like to answer those first. And those questions are actually exactly to the point here.
춘이 대마 통용들 렘바신도 통계래나 직접 통계래서 저와들도 와다들라 렌 제다르면도 숨여래 숨는 단다가 좀뭐 저기 로소 시작하는 로고도 저 시작하는 조인데 렘바신도 통계래서 그래 렘바 통단데 방자 봉수당 님바 통단데 렘바 여래 방 단다 가서 방자 봉단데 다다 내서 아니 통용되잖아 동알지 녀마바 대방방렘 바람라 예셰야를 말을 맞줄라 되기래 그래서 동알 추수 최시 제수 제시에서는 희열에 네 가성 조성해
칸데스
동알 추수 최시 제수 제시 군중나양 다나지 추수 뒤로 시시시집이 네 주주 계제 주주 전이 돈을 계제 주주서 그래 어디를 마신도 동알 추수 추시 제수 제시rembe 레병도 동알 군중고 발람 람제 추수 추시 제수 바도 통남장마 장장래 람제 제시레빈도 다 범람 차사래서 혼자 뭔가 저기로리나 되네로 좀 그래 이 대체 다른가 무슨 쉬워라
That's one. So the first question, I lost here the page. So the first question was about the Four Noble Truths on the path of seeing and whether they're observed gradually or at once, whether the meaning of all of them is perceived suddenly and at once, all of those, or gradually. And actually there are 3 different answers to this question. Here, what we have just seen, we're covering the presentation of the Abhidhamma Kosha. And according to the Abhidhamma Kosha, the truths are perceived gradually. So this has to do with the way that the afflictions, those discards are being abandoned. So when we look at the path of seeing, according to the Abhidhamma Kosha, each of the truths is being perceived one after the other. And also that perception has like 4 different aspects to it. So there are these 16 stages of the path of seeing according to the Four Noble Truths and their 4 divisions. And so as one of the misapprehensions is being eliminated, then the according wisdom arises at the same time. So with the abandonment of one, the knowledge, the seeing of that aspect of the particular truth arises. And so therefore there is 16 aspects to the path of seeing, or these 16 stages to the path of seeing according to the Four Noble Truths.
that the len tanda temba shina tanda kunjung lebso lamden kapso yang ja lebgire ina tanda shushana jela kosal do shazare ni da tongal da rere la shishi do chösu chöshe jesu jeshe sana shilegiro wa tongal chösu chanor chösa je soba kombarwa chösu labin de tongal gi 방자 뇌베 감지 방자도아 뇌베 감지 방자도 방위 년보 제신베 갑라 최 서바 세래 년보체는 방 신베 깨지 니바들라 최수 최셰 세래 아니 제 서서도나 감광만이 이제 방자도아 감광만이 이제 방자도 방 신베 값선하면 년보 제신베 갑들라 아니 제수 세래 제수 서바 제 시세근데 감 공매 방지도 방 스마 타봐 방 차마 타봐들라 최시에서 그래 그래서 제시 더 동알지디 시 사오실은 군중에다가 나신 시 아니 고바에다가 나신 시 라면에다가 나신 시 되더베 리메도 용두 남된 게더니 제시에 가서 방자 가야 라면에서 방 심바로 와서 통방지 방자 가 방스마 메서 그거 공방 가로 통남 말에 검남래 와 되네라고 전에 소에다가 뭔가 저기로 소 인사 그래서
시딜라 시디 민양게 라브로나
쇠선 서바지 쇠들와
라선
셰바 하고 셰비셰바 쇠 딘딘이보다 제 아주 뭐마다 제만인지 제들에 제셰
라서
어디 단어로 하고는 상인한지 람된 가서 연결해 그래
So the answer here actually will follow also when we are discussing the truth of the path, when we're discussing the 5 paths there. But there's nothing to be said against already introducing this now. So when we look at the Four Noble Truths at the path of seeing, then there are these 4 stages of patience with regard to the Dhamma, then knowing the Dhamma or the phenomena, then the subsequent patience and the subsequent knowledge. And this applies to all the 4 truths. Here we first spoke about the truth of suffering. So the truth of suffering has these 4 stages that describe, first of all, the patience that one develops with regard to the necessity of abandoning the truth of suffering. So the truth of suffering is of knowing and then needing to abandon that. So the first stage, the truth of suffering, here then the patience with regard to that is the first stage, where the first level is achieved. Then knowing the truth of suffering, so knowing the phenomena of the truth of suffering is then the second stage. And then once that has been achieved, when the antidotes are continuously applied in the higher stages of practice, like with that knowledge, that's then the subsequent endurance or subsequent patience, and then the final stage was that the subsequent knowledge, which is then the stage where the discards of the truth of suffering on the path of seeing are completely abandoned. So this is the gradual way of abandoning those, and that then that when these four, or when applied to the four truths, then these 16 instances are traversed gradually, then we speak about all the discards of the path of seeing being abandoned, and therefore we don't speak about the being on the path of seeing anymore, but then having progressed to the path of cultivation. So yes, we will see that further when we're discussing the 5 paths. So this is how the Abhidhamma Kosha describes the gradual abandonment of those discards.
나서 네 저 샴바디 가서 군중당 데 가르세라 다다 테마스 군중
인사고
군중 통방 유를 공부 라 군중 통방 공부를 미다와당 대다지도 미진 김진 가르래서 들어와라
알았어.
그래 동안 군중 데디 군중 템바 통을 방저를 교류고 공부를 다도 미달라 대원기 다들 나주도 미다 다지도 미진 김진 어디 계전들 사실 보도 송래 라
네, 직담에
라
직담당 다와 초ten디 메베 겸sen
김진디 어디 쓰거다 가서 그래 동알디 제규르게 차당 군중디 규규르게 차인다 그러와 근데 동알디 제규르인도 풍망하라 하는 태가 롱수죠 그래서 군중디 규이 남바 인도잖아 풍망아 태가 롱수 묘죠 봐지고 풍망아 롱수 조지기 규지 그래서 저도 그 규네 그 규바지는 거기 균전이 남자 요래 이나 태강탱한이 그 자와치기 매바 인상 한 지다만 타다라니 자와치기 매에서 그 렌데로 주는 거 요래 너무 되네졌나.
So the second question then was with regard to the statement that the discards of the path of the truth of origin on the path of seeing are only 7, and the question was to please explain why the view of the transitory collections, as well as holding view as paramount, are not subject of abandonment, so discards, on when seeing the truth of origin. And so when we look at the truth of suffering and the truth of origin, then the truth of suffering is the result, and the truth of origin is the cause, right? And so the result, the truth of suffering, the 5 aggregates are directly engaged in, or they directly experienced. And so there the grasping to the 5 aggregates is as being the self is there. But at the stage of the cause, so the truth of origin, when we speak about karma and afflictive emotions, actually the 5 aggregates are not directly experienced, directly engaged with. that comes gradually afterwards. So when we look at the progression, then the 5 aggregates are a part of that, but not directly when we think of the causal stage of the truth of origin. So because at that point, like when we think about the cause, which is the truth of origin, there's the result, which are the 5 aggregates, are not directly engaged in, but only indirectly through like some more stages. Therefore, it's said that for the truth of origin, there isn't that part, that abandonment. That's not a direct discard for the truth of origin.
그래서 다들 먼저 가리고 두 버려서 네 동알지 값도 안에 대강 먼저 저 제거가 인도잖아. 대 방선 말해. 동알 정보 방 살아봐. 근데 동알지 동방방서 니버 공중 레뷰잖아. 그 방자디 율태강 자와집이 있네번에 그 단다 네버 조사래. 소소지 임배 가면은 네버 열어와. 또 단다 파비 데우토 병도 동알지 값이 율태강 자와조 규지 자원에 그 네버 매버 샤사래. 규지 네버 매버 샤디 안 콜 방자인데 방마다 이렇게 시 매버 인도 있는 거. 근데 전에는 가서 군중 방자 시에 가서 지금 좀 맥스로 좀 전데 근데 두고 여사래.
And what do we need to understand here? Actually, it's this the gradual progression from the truth of suffering to the truth of origin. When first the truth of suffering is seen, the direct engagement, the direct misapprehension, the direct action of apprehending of abandoning the grasping to the transitory collections, the view of the transitory collections is already abandoned. So that is already abandoned when seeing the truth of suffering. If the direct engagement, the direct activity or engagement or experience of the view of the transitory collections is already abandoned, then anything that comes subsequently, like that's further removed from that, is also already abandoned. So when we reach, when the discard of the truth of the truth of suffering, which is the view of the transitory collections, is already abandoned when seeing the truth of suffering, then because that's the direct one, then a subsequent or a further removed idea of the view of the transitory collections, which would be that of the truth of origin, does not need to be abandoned anymore. So that's already dealt with when realizing, when seeing the truth of suffering, and it does not reapply to the truth of origin. Those were all the questions we had. So let's recite the Manjushri prayer.
Lamadang gombo jezun jambe yangla jazal kange lodru jemne jendra nida namda rabzal jine dungun cheshin zenjir nige doga lebam Kanda zebe teramare mundon dongal jezerve rozo gola boje darz yelan joju yandez roda jero yomoni Leje jaro jonze mare munze dongal nyubu jinye joze ralrena ne daje zaju darazu enlenzo jaze dovebu Chudra Judan Junyin Jendri Talu Munzil Jab Yala Marabadana Marabazanandi Zenden Jeje Jeravusre Talu Dembo Mombarazandi Kada Denju Jolo Tombai Lord Bobe Nawa Zaldozo Kanze Dawar Deba Chonze Jewar Denayam Pombo Jamya Denyin Keme Barya Dongwar Shu Laso Tinin Sangme Samba Jangju Shodo Todi Bepolong Saldan de Seronang.
So, and please all give rise to Bodhicitta, the intention to attain perfect and complete enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings.
Da Kanjik Sembar Javu Chu Yerimba Ni Jamon Mevaro Mujik Sumbi Kebi Sula Jubimbo Tinire Tandela Ne Judang Temba Chedang Choji Tom Chedang Dende Yungu Yubinane Tanangazo Ta Temba Shi Negabdila Lededo.
And in this class, we're discussing the text by Jamgon Mipam Rinpoche that's called The Gateway to Knowledge. The treatise entitled The Gate for Entering the Way of a Pandita. And it covers a whole number of topics, including the 10 topics of expertise. And within there, we also find the Four Truths. And then there's also the discussion of the Four Seals of Dharma, and so on. And right now, we have a discussion of the Four Noble Truths.
Da Temba, da Nejunana Jeba Temba Redwa, da Jeba Temba Shindela, Nitungal Kunjung Goba Lamji Temba Shi Yubinane, da Niba Tanangazo, Kunjung Temba Yinamasha de Resha, Ni Kunjung Temba Telayanda, Nega Mambuji Do de Tanangazo, da Kunjung Pangja Pangsul Dang, da Denzo Ye Tez Chaje Jirema, Jeba Ti Jikam Lebde Doa, Tinanada, Kan Kunjung Gita, Pangja Pangsul Tela de Kasagore. Ngomba Zujilu de Pangja Pangsul Sheda Jeda, Ngomba Kundujilu de Pangja Pangsul de Sheda Jeda, Leving Doa, Tanangazo, Ngomba Zujilu de Pangja Pangsul de Shashimbe Redo, Tadinazo, Remedian Shugi.
So, in our text, so that we find the 10 topics of expertise, and out of those 10 topics, the 8th one is the topic of the truth, which discusses the Four Noble Truths. So from within the truth of suffering, origin, cessation, and the path, we're currently discussing the truth of origin. And there are many important points that this discussion covers. And we have reached the part where we discuss how the manner of abandoning the discards. And so it's really the stage in the discussion of the abandonment of the afflictive emotions and the discussion of the subtle developers, right? And there we find the discussion of when these different discards are being abandoned and how. And there are two different explanations according to the Abhidhamma Kosha and the Abhidhamma Samuccaya. And currently we're talking about the presentation as it is given in the Abhidhamma Kosha. Jag kan väl läsa. Läs.
대달 되베 방제 링아처 되베 숨주 소주 소감나 소지 소메나야 소지데 감좀게 방제 돈노 구주 거제도 여바 저기 로소서 데레도아 제도
ngazo gomlam ki di tsayo mare ngazo gochuk gege bado lepso panja gege bado tus
셀디 송난다
deba na gomlam
나서 대달은 도바 나 알라서 돈베 뽕 통외 방자 자제 살성로 하나 되버도 알라서 도바나 곰남제 방자 도자 콩도 가잘 말이 바시당 감고만이나 콩도 마도 숨re 여베 견dom노 공방 주 살에 데려도 다다 통방도 저도 공방 데려도 알라서라서 아니 도바나 곰람 제뽕 딱 방자 저랑 주지 나서 삼랑 내 샤야라 따왕아 나 타밍아 디주디 내잖아 아니 나도 도바나 곰람 제뽕자 도바나 곰람 제뽕자 도자 콩도 가자 말아 희당 다 방제 주 열에도 주나는 관방값도 상마 열에다 여 말했으나 여 말했지 보고 열에 방제 주자 깨지해 매스 하나 간데지 거래 람나 되게 감될 겁남 이 방제도 방 가르스나 따왕하나 담민한 된전나네 아니 담민 따와도 깨지해 보고 면도 담민 지고 깨지해 보고 도와 가르는 도자 공도 가자 말이 뭐 다시 마도 매 쓰여래 대 가서 대방 대비 방제 값수 동al 공중 거바 람스나 대바시레레레 현재 제야열에 건방 값수 대 현재 제거해요 말에 도저 그런지 어딘데 마도 안에 현 야와 망부도 고민도 건방 값수 건람 값수 방제 안에 시지고 인사 라서.
So we have reached paragraph 1084 on page 133. In the desire realms, those subtle developers which are discarded by means of the path of cultivation are four: the inherent aspect of desire, anger, conceit, and ignorance. In the two upper realms, since anger is excluded, each realm has three inherent discards. Therefore, when all are added together, there are 10 inherent discards by means of the path of cultivation. So when we talk about the subtle developers, the afflictive emotions or discards that are to be discarded on the path of cultivation in the desire realm, then there are four. And here we need to look again, or we have to keep in mind the discards that we have already seen. And for the path of seeing, we spoke about the 5 views and the 5 non-views, so 10 discards total. And those had to be abandoned. But now in the desire realm, on the path of, the discards on the path of cultivation from the desire realm are then 4. Not so. Do we have to think about all the 10 discards? No. Here we don't have to think about all of them. So which ones are actually present and need to be discarded on the path of cultivation? Those are only 4: desire, anger, conceit, and ignorance. So we were talking about 5 views and 5 non-views. When the mistaken grasping to self is eliminated, then also the other views are eliminated. So actually view falls away when this direct insight has happened, and therefore all views or beliefs do not count into that or are not discards on the path of cultivation anymore, but only the 4 that are left. So desire, anger, conceit, and ignorance.
상제단 다줌기 저 마도비 버도 방자 차르니 제비 라바여 말에 터부차도 요래 운다다 현진이 대제비 운다데 여 말인데 현지기차 아니 강당하여서는 된소 도자 공동 가자 말해서 근데 저 요대요래 하나 콘조지 레사르바사 투그레스는 레사르바사에 네바디 여 말에 녀모바 께 삼지마도바 균장 두고 말해 나zo 녀모바 께네 균디 장 두고도 와 되네 레사그로 와 파베 강살라 근데 레사에 녀바셔라 여 말에 께 고 남성 깨진이 발라 딜레 젬바 마슈치네 라도 그래 현재 기차 여 말에서 맞아
대충 데 타와라 지그레베
대좀 타와
다 타와르죠
타와는 지금 그런 가가래라
제제레 얘네 다다시디 나라민도 걔랑 몰라 데
대좀 예사 말아 도자 공동 가전 말이
제
도자 공동 가전 말이 희여래 대좀 대베제 여기 말해 대좀 예사 말해 여내 된지 희여나 내 너로래
말은 데 쉬요 말이 얘네 걔랑 타와 타와 방자대도 민도스 송송 아니 근데 대좀 데 카발레서
대좀량 여 말해
양요
여바데 희지고래 도자 공동 가전 말이
And so I clarified here. Also, doubt falls away. Is not a discard on the path of cultivation anymore. So the only ones that remain are these 4. The 4: desire, anger, conceit, and ignorance. And so if we now think about it, so what does it even mean here? What are we talking about here as the discards on the path of cultivation? Does that do realized beings have afflictive emotions? Do they continue to accumulate karma even? And what about the Buddha? Actually, we need to consider this in light of the coarse and the subtle afflictive emotions, or in light of the distinction of imputed and co-emergent afflictive emotions. So actually, on the path of cultivation, all the imputed afflictive emotions, all the coarse afflictive emotions have already been abandoned. There are only subtle traces of afflictive emotions left, or subtle afflictive emotions left, and the co-emergent aspect of the afflictive emotions. And that means that actually on the path of cultivation, no new karma will be accumulated. But afflictive emotions, the co-emergent afflictive emotions might still arise. So when there are still co-emergent afflictive emotions, subtle afflictive emotions arising, why do beings on the path of cultivation than not accumulate karma, it's because those afflictive emotions do not continue on. There's no continuum of those. So they arise, and then when there is no grasping to them, there won't be a continuation of these particular afflictive emotions. And that continuation, grasping to them and the continuation is necessary for the accumulation of new karma. So on the path of cultivation, afflictive emotions, these co-emergent afflictive emotions arise in the first moment, but then there's no grasping to them in the second moment, so they just cease.
감 공만이나 공도 마도도 순대 예배 준 돈나 공방주 다들 동방시에 가보는 집어치자래 감 공만이나 공도 맥스게 봐 그래서 공도 계획이 주 아니 되게 방자도 방선 바로 와서 내가 이제 방자 지당다 감 공만을 여긴 강사 상마라 아니 공도 선이는 매발해당 내가 좀 매발해서 대체 니 연구를 다디 초니나 삼나야도아 소소기오 인겐 소감당 소매감나 대간 강사도지이나 그 내가 대rin데라 콘도춘이야 말해 콘도게지 규진 갑디는 내가 좀 매바자 말해 다 파베 강사도지를 삼나다나 콘도디 짬에 더 사와래 자원에 거는 매바자 사와래 디 가서 뭐만가서 디셰베 동방시베 가면 김전 넣어다 장래 디인데 아니 공도 매바 인도잖아다 된지 도자 공도 가자 말해 봐 희나네 공도 뼈서는 수마도 라이 말은 도자 가자 말해 간전 도자 율라 세바타와 타와지 여대여래 나절 거랑기 풍멍아나 된설랑 나절 휴청보다 여 말해 돼 나절 타와타와 나진 중중중중 나오 냠마다 중선 냠 나절들 중래 중들이 오늘 매바래 다 말해 봐 마반데 거 자주마도 더비 말와 디인저서나 딘소 숨보데 다 검람기 파바 된소나야 연구 여바 인도 딱고 방적이 줄도 여래 방적 여바 인도 때 레베레베레 된소 방고고 여래 방 셈바 있나 자주마도 더 버선 라고로와 디숨 유디산아니 소함라 안 방적 가서 샤송 숨차서 도자 나잘 말이 숨에 감라야 도자 나잘 말이 숨제 또 현재 강라 되게 감들라 방자 건방방자 가서 자송 희여와 도자 공동 가자 말이 제비 건람제 방자 용돈 가서 자송 주 어디를 했습니다.
So then in the two upper realms, so when we speak now about the form and formless realm, again, just as we have seen it in when we were discussing the truth of the path of seeing, there is again no anger in the list of discards for the two higher realms, also on the path of cultivation, because when a being has reached, has arrived at the form and formless realms, then there's just no cause for anger to arise. So therefore, this is from within the three realms. This is also already something that is a discard of the path of the. It's a discard of the desire realm that has been abandoned already when one is reborn in the form or formless realms. So in the higher realms, there is just no anger. And actually there we have to distinguish a little bit. There are two types of abandonment, right? One is a temporary abandonment that anger does not arise, that there are no causes for anger to arise in the higher realms. And the other way of abandonment of anger is to have completely eradicated all potential for anger to ever arise again. And so for ordinary beings on the form and formless realms, there are just no causes for anger to arise, and therefore anger has been temporarily abandoned. The complete abandonment happens then when the path of seeing is achieved. Then there won't be any further potential even for anger to arise. And so that means then that there is no anger left at all, not even a subtle form of it, not even the co-emergent arising of anger. And so that being said, this means then that again, also on the path of cultivation, we need to subtract anger from the list of discards. So while when the path of accumulation is achieved from the desire realm, then there is 4 discards from in the 2 upper realms. Anger does not exist, so therefore the form realm has only 3 discards left, and the formless realm has only 3 discards left. And that actually means that actually there is the subtle form or the co-emergent form of desire, like some little disposition for craving left, for the afflictive emotion of craving to arise left. Also some conceit, so some pride, very subtle form of pride of the accomplishment, and also ignorance. Unless ignorance has been completely abandoned, other hardship cannot be obtained. If ignorance is completely abandoned, both subtle and coarse, then our hardship is attained, the final result is attained. But here, this means that they're still in a process of being abandoned, the more subtle forms, these co-emergent afflictions of desire, conceit, and ignorance. And so that then means that on the path of cultivation, from in the desire realm, there are 4 discards: desire, anger, conceit, and ignorance. And on the path of in the form realm and in the formless realm, we have 3 discards respectively on the path of cultivation. They're not all these other classifications to the path of cultivation, and so we have it. If we count them together, 4, 3, 3, we have 10 discards on the path of cultivation, or by means of the path of cultivation.
So, 대들 너버 방자 링아서 덤베 소주사 제대로는 너베 감들라 방자 링아차도는 소주라도잖아 너베 감라 통방 히어와 통마실라 가서 그래 동할 템 통방데 아주 쭉와 군중 통방데 뒤 아니 군중 고바양 집어 지장 든 남된 예 된대제 근데 집에 숨주 손이 자주와 대강라 되네 공방 찍는 것도 와 통방로 동안 군중 거 발람시 네 공방되든지 희여 받는 면은 숨주 소주여서 대다다 차기도 알아
맞아. So then in this way, when summing up the 5 classes of discards, there are 36 altogether in the realms of desire. So, and then the 4 discards, the desire, anger, conceit, and ignorance, and on the path of cultivation, there are 4 discards on the path of cultivation. And on the path of cultivation, there are 10 discards on the list of discards. So while the desire realm is still in a process of being abandoned, the more subtle forms, these co-emergent afflictions of desire, conceit, ignorance, and pride, when we were looking at the path of seeing in the desire realm, then we said that there were 32 discards, because we said that the path of seeing constitutes the seeing of the Four Noble Truths. And so when perceiving the truth of suffering, there were 10 discards. When perceiving the truth of origin, there were 7 discards. The truth of cessation, again 7, and then the truth of the path had 8 discards. And so that made 32 discards. If we now add the 4 discards of the path of cultivation in the desire realm, then we come to the number of 36, which is right?
Tene sukam la pangja sochi ka tenjine ma nga chakarwa sumsoru tungal ji tongbang la chuyo ba na jing ne sukam ji tongbang ku chakarwa ane kunjung ji tongbang kunjung da lam ji tongbang ni de kunjung da gobara kunjung da goba ni tenji tuyun yo ba chuk chuk chaswa sum do so tene goba ji 개드나 둔차도잖아 둔차도와 희말라 차도와 아니 공방계지 차베드는 나말라 차도는 지버지 야르 숨주 소지 대지버지 양 숨메나양 소지 돼서 다가나 방저링가 여러 동안 군중 고발람 공방제 방저링가 링가나 레레레레 말라 차도나 공도데 말자에 말레레 말자 윤도니 숨주 소지 요여서 나서
So 31 in the realms of form and 31 in the formless realms. So for the form realm, then we need to subtract 5. So there are 5 less discards because, as we have seen previously, the desire realm in the desire realm, we had 10, 7, 7, and 8 discards applying to the 4 truths on the path of seeing. But on in the form realm and in the formless realm, there is no anger, so there are 9 discards when perceiving the truth of suffering in the on the path of seeing in the form realm, and accordingly there are 6 discards to the truth of origin, 6 discards to the truth of cessation, and 7 discards to the truth of the path. And also the path of cultivation has 1 less discard than the truth on the path of the path of cultivation also has 1 less discard in the form realm than it has in the desire realm. So overall we have 5 less discards, and that then makes a total of 31 discards in the form realm, and likewise 31 discards in the formless realm. And that is just how we enumerate them based on the 5 classes of discards again.
So then kamsumje pangja domna kubju koju de yoba zoju loso zi kangla kangzam jo rob sa kya bayna kubju koju res.
Thus, according to the system of the Abhidhamma Kosha, there are altogether 98 discards throughout the 3 realms. So if we now calculate that all together, there we roughly enumerate how many discards there are, then there are 98 discards according to the Kosha.
그래다 다 십사로나 아니 통방을 녀다 요 말에 제주 잡제 다랑래 공방대 되네 때에서 아니 양 나는 주는 거야 도고 그래.
So this is when we just look at it in a very rough way, actually. There's no big problem with regard to the discards on the path of seeing. That there the number of 88 is actually precise. But on the path of cultivation, these 10 discards that we discussed there we can go into more detail, and that bears more discussion actually.
다 내한테 빼면서 갈래 되네 가면도 아니 당가서 통방 공방 두배 감로 공방 시여라 시디다 콜라 줄 거래 제대로는 당보 가서 두배 통방 공방 홍도지여라 홍도지라 가서 이래서도 최중딩 숨지 한 첨부 대라양 첨부 등 전부 중무들라야 되는 신진이 등라 되는 제도잖아 공도직 구 하는 도자이 나라 가jal에 말이 시자라니 구 구지고 그래 그 구지는 배제 가서 구시 숨주소로 그래 봐 그래 어디에 지고 그래 나서
So it's actually not difficult to calculate that. To calculate the disturbing emotions on the path of cultivation. When we look at the path of cultivation from the desire realm, then we said that there are 4 discards, right? We said there's desire, anger, conceit, and ignorance. But it is not enough to just enumerate them like that. We actually have to look at the 9 aspects of each of them. How do you get to 9? When we take anger as an example, there's actually greater, middling, and lesser anger. So there are 3 levels of anger. And then the greater anger, again, can be divided into 3 stages or 3 intensities. So there's the greater, the greater, middling, then the greater, lesser anger. The same for the middling and for the lesser anger. So anger actually includes 9 aspects of anger. The same for desire, conceit, and ignorance. So that then gives us actually a number of 36. So 9 times 4, 36 discards.
Also da döbe kam de 공방대 대해서 협차 제바이나 숨주 소로 차소와 다 감광만이 되는 대해서 마음도 그래 감광만을 망보 여러 소감 시 소마감 히여와 소감라 삼전 당보 니바 손바 시바시 손바감라 남가다 남신다 자매바 유매매비 히여와 어 건저 히레레라 다 대ten지로 우도 그래 나우도 그래도 건저라 공도 매봐 수감 삼전 당보라 니 때에서 권역부터 오지 여래 야구 삼노다는 요거 사람이도 당가서 찍지 야가로 당보 삼전 당보라 방자 숨여래 공방 말이 도차 나잘 로 타와 나당 공도 아니 공도 된서 매봐 말이 도차 공도 마도 매봐 그 공도에 말이 도차 나잘 삼전 당보라 숨여래 다 디나는 말이 봐 찍지는 그래 말이 봐 될라 고거래 첨보 중등 첨보 중 첨보 등 등기 첨보 등기 등기 중무 아니 중무되나 중무 첨보 중무 등 다 되는 희여와 제거도와 대체되잖아 삼년 당벌라 숨 고숨 숨주 소주는 된지 말하다 가서 잡고도 숨주 소재 찾아들어와 다 대투.
니시 잡든.
23년 나다라 3년 3년 당벌라 아니 23년 차서와 다 디지구지 그냥 상만은 줘야 돼. 3년 당벌라 가서 거라 콩로 말은 콩로야 말해. 말이 봐 23년 차래 래.
Love.
말이 봐 지고 23년 돼. 라서 당분 되지 송나.
Love. So I'm taking out my calculator now. So actually it's a little bit more intricate than for the higher realms though, because the form realm and the formless realm have 4 stages each, right? So we have the 4 meditative absorptions, the 4 dhyanas, in the form realm, and then we have the 4 meditative absorptions, so the 4 levels of the formless realm. Each of these 4 stages then need to be considered individually. That means when we look at the form realm, we can take the first dhyana as the example, right? So the first stage of the form realm has 3 discards: ignorance, desire, and pride. And each of them needs to be enumerated in terms of 9 as well. So there is there again the 3. Greater ignorance, middling ignorance, and lesser ignorance. And then each of them has 3 again. So there's the greater, the greater middling, the greater lesser ignorance. Then there is the middling greater, the middling middling, the middling lesser ignorance. And then there's the lesser greater, lesser middling, lesser ignorance. Makes 9 9 types of ignorance that are the discards on, like, that belong to the discards of ignorance on the path of cultivation on the first dhyana of the form realm. So when we then multiply this by 3, because we also have the same applying for desire and for conceit, then we don't have the 36 that we had in the desire realm, but now we have 27. It's 27 discards left for the first dhyana of the form realm.
수감라 돈비 방자 숨주 니지 잡든 로와 수감 말 3년 당벌라 말이 콩로 말이 도착 나잘 숨 돈비 니지 잡든 다 디지고지 양 3년 제 버스 마시바 아니 숨에 감시 니지 잡든 저거 그래 다 니지 잡든 계지 가서래 닌자 주주 레벨라
That's cool. 니게 주족.
닌자 주주 그래서 되는래 그래.
No. So now we said we have 27 discards on the first dhyana of the form realm on the path of cultivation, right? That then applies also to the second dhyana, to the third dhyana, and to the fourth dhyana, and likewise to the 4 levels of the formless realm, which then, if we count 27 each, and these are 8 stages, so we have 216 discards to the form and formless realms.
Also, den 소감 나오는 건 이제 건방 ninja 주주 아니 된지 되게 감지 숨주 소주 건전이 돈비 돈 건방 돈데 ninja 응압 중 아니 다다 찾고 그래 다다 찾기도 해
And so since we have now for the form and formless realms, we have 216 disturbing emotions or discards. Then we add to that the 36 of the desire realm, and then that should end up, and I hope it ends up, at 252 discards on the path of cultivation.
So dine de gang la so 통방 제주 잡대요 봐. 통방 제주 잡는데 용도 돈비 감정비 방자 숨자 십주. 어다 된지 로블록스는 급주 급대요 봐. 십자잖아. 숨자 십주래 그래.
So if we then add so we have 252 discards on the path of cultivation if we enumerate it in detail like this. And we said there were 88 discards on the path of seeing. So we had 88 on the discards on the path of seeing. Adding those together, we have 340 discards. And so when we just roughly enumerate them, then we have 99 discards. But if we go in some detail, then we can come up to the number of 340 discards here.
요 구구 저거 봐도 가르스는 아주 방자 야 방용되잖아 라바라고 채워 된죠 몰라 방고고 요래 아니 당고 라바데 마방 와라 아니 타워도 방도고 말해 아니 다 가서 그래 건방 첨부돼 뭐죠 다 준식 체론 값을 배제줘서는 제일 명당 다 되는지 치롱다 치르명다 데데데가 레병도 당보 락쇼 대방 데네 락쇼 방사와저 데네 때 증와 대방 당보다 락바숨이요 봐 락바숨 데레베 제방 아니 딩보숨 데레베 방 타워숨 데레베 젠데네 데네제는 방도고 그래 다 타워데 방송은 아니 신에 자주마도 그래 타워데 마방 바도 자주마도 말해
So why do we actually need to go into this detail? Like why do we actually speak about the detailed analysis of the discards where we have 9 levels of discards to each of the for each of the afflictions for each of the discards? So why does ignorance have 9 aspects to it and so on? Why do we have all this big enumeration, this very detailed enumeration here? It's because of the gradual abandonment that a practitioner has to undergo of these discards. Actually, in order to completely eliminate all forms of ignorance or anger, first one needs to start with abandoning the more coarse forms. If the coarse has not been abandoned, then the more subtle cannot be abandoned. So for the levels of realization of the Shravaka Yana, then it is important to go through these levels of elimination of the discards. First, I need to, we were looking at, or we already saw the stream enterer, the once returner, non-returner, and then Arhat, the 4 results of the Shravakayana. And so in order to traverse that, first the practitioner needs to abandon the coarse the three coarse kinds of afflictions, then the middling ones, and then finally the subtle ones. One cannot abandon the subtle disturbing emotions, the subtle discards, before the coarse ones have not been abandoned. And so when all of them are gone, when even the subtle, the subtlest, so the lesser form of a disturbing emotion has been abandoned, like when all of the lesser ones are also gone, then this is our hardship. So we need to apply that to the results of the Shravakayana. And the abandonment from coarse to subtle necessitates the distinction into 9 levels. Kiranki ke karso.
Remba ku che, ku de mama che sono da ninjangab jungani ma pardo. Che ninjangab jungani re ninjangab jungani pardo ma che ayoro. The ku de mama ninjangab jungani de che go jungzan zo de. 강 tu 그래서 또 빵자 nyomba tar chao se sona dena mangbo le beng doa ta di mes chao se jo mara jingbo ji se jore ta mes chao se sona nga zo pangja desi gere jeji xidong daja ni de xidong xiadang ni de xidong dimu ni de xidong ani duksum changyam ni de xidong sona jeji xidong yore singre 이 초지 공부 제대로 중간 되는 순간 봐. 다들 때 정말 두루 당나 어떤지 먼저 돈비 숨제 십주 될래기도 와. 다 숨제 십주 나네 했더니 건방 집에서는 인정 법중 아니래. 어 딘조다 방저래 레메 방배 갑로 녀버 예시양 레메 소소요 승계래. 다는 저주로서나면도 년대 대별로 와. 녀버 방저래를 거는 뭐 그런 게 방저대 다다다다 되는 마도 뭐 셴바지기 셴바 방두고 말해서 그래. 통방디 공 년보다 공방제 제도 말 공방년보다 통방제 제도 말에 공방라양 콩 가서 그래. 통 공방라양 콩로 중무디 년보다 등기 제도 말에 콩로 중무디 년보다 더작 중무디 년보제로 혼존이 찌기지 년보 제도 말에 소소소소 년보 소소소소래. 레메 신도 가가가가 열어. 깨지한 가가가가 열에 빵자 소소소소라 데레메레메 요드 아니 민다오 망보데네 아니 지기여서 열에.
So when we enumerate 9 levels of each of the discards, so when we have the 9 levels of anger, the 9 levels of ignorance, and so on, and we come to the full enumeration of 252 disturbing emotions or discards on the path of cultivation, that is actually not even the most subtle way of enumerating it. It's the middling way of analyzing the discards or classifying the discards. The most subtle version is to have 84,000 discards, things that need to be abandoned, where there are 24,000 discards to ignorance, 24,000 discards to that pertain to desire, and 24,000 discards that pertain to anger, and then 24,000.
말해. 그렇죠. 이직 지동 동는 유사지, 샤동 동는 유사지, 공도 동는 유사지, 공도 숨념도 여봐 동는 유사지.
Sorry, not 24,000, 21,000 each. So 21,000 for ignorance, 21,000 desire, and 21,000 for anger, and then 21,000 that pertain to all of the 3 poisons. That's how we usually enumerate the 84,000 afflictive emotions, right? Or things that need to be abandoned. Now, if we look at the presentation that we have just seen, though, according to the Abhidhammakosha, or according to the tradition of the Shravakayana, then each of these discards actually needs to be addressed by their own particular antidote. Each of them has a particular antidote, and another antidote won't work against that. So only the particular antidote to that particular discard can eliminate that discard, can eliminate that afflictive emotion. So the antidote of the path of seeing cannot be applied to the path of cultivation's discards, or the other way around. And even in the subtle levels of the afflictive emotion, so when we have the different levels of anger, for example, the antidote that is to the antidote to the lesser anger cannot be applied, will not function as an antidote against the greater anger. So according to that, then it is absolutely necessary to apply the particular antidote to a particular discard and no other antidote. So each gradual stage of the path has a different topic, has a different, we're talking about different things there, different antidotes that need to be applied, different stages of the gradual path.
나서 되네. 배가리 샤그레스니 온나바 가서 휴고 뒤로지 여바이나 가서 휴고대 컵 잡으러 와. 대수야치도 컵 잡뒤 이렇게 가서 통대서는 드랍 선택마치로지 통그래. 이나르메 여러 와서 깨지 당보디 니바 수치기 이공 보디 가서 샤마샤마 뿌요 말와. 그런 깨지양 가가래 뿌지지 규양 가가래 겐 가가래 뒤져야 가가래 잘라도 찍으러지 통그래데 뒤져 가가 여바 나신도 님보 뒤미노 그래서 남지 그래 예시에 가가래라 방자양 가가래서 니마 당가서 로나 왜든지 따다서 왜 체중기 뭔가 체중 쓸기도 와서 왜 가서 채워 당와 뭔가데 뇽아요래 왜 가서 중화요 뭔가데 휴 채워요래 디 방자다 님보 로가로 호랑호랑 가가 임버니 레마도 찍바 많이 거든서 그래.
An example that is given for this is that of a book, for example. When the book is being bound, then, like this one is glued, I think, but generally when it's bound, like with a needle, when it's stitched, then there are all these different pages, right? All the different pages, these leaves or and the different pieces of paper. And so when it is being bound by stitching, then the needle will look as if it would be going through the entire stack of paper at once. But actually, if we think about it thoroughly, then it goes through one page at a time. And so each of them has their own particular time, their own condition, their own circumstances. And so there's a gradual movement through each of the pages, and it's not possible to pierce all of them at once. So while it appears as being one thing, like the stack of paper, it is pierced at once, if we look at it thoroughly and logically, there is a gradual process, and we cannot exchange, like switch off like it has to go exactly in that order when we pierce the paper. And so likewise, as wisdom develops, then also like that's a gradual process of developing wisdom, just like piercing the paper is a gradual development, and each discard has to be abandoned individually. So if we look at light, for example, the more light there is, the less darkness there will be. And so as the light increases, then the darkness gradually is reduced. But it's a gradual process in each of these cases.
다 군두줄로래 근데서 양 줄로래 대고 소소인데 인샤단 테스트스 메도 용그래 근데나 땡징가서 저한테는 가서 방저 소소소소래 카카카래 깨지레면 인색이요 봐 당원 바 군디 시대 양 되나 요 말해 제도블라 네버 된 용도 카카카가 도저 요래서 돈은 몇시 깨지 찍마도 니스 메스 그래 가서 돈은 매절 깨지 채거나 매버라 그 전이 내루거나 내대로 내루라 깨지 가내진 책이 있어 어디에 시에지요 양 군두 남절로 돈에 샘잠에 셔다 찍라 깨지 주로 되는 여 말에 깨지 시여서 근도다 되는 레벨에
깨지 시대 술라게도
이 샘잠에 쳐단게 샘잠에 로지 그래 깨지 다디 상년아니 마오 렌삼 올라 레벨에 되는 리머스미에 쉬인 봐 올라 레벨에 되는 반다 배나 대로 송단 되는지 레벨에
So we can now already start a little bit with the next topic, which is then the presentation from the Abhidhamma Samuccaya. After now we have having now completed the Abhidhamma Kosha explanation. And according to each tradition, there are some differences, right? They have their own particular assertions, and so there are some differences between the presentation in the Kosha and the presentation in the Samuccaya. For example, if we look back at the question at the beginning of the class, the question was whether it's instantaneous or like in one moment that the different discards are being abandoned to the Four Truths, or whether it is gradually. And I mentioned already there that there are actually three different answers, and I gave one of them. I gave the one of the Abhidhamma Kosha. Now, according to the Kosha, it was a gradual process. But here now, for example, while we can distinguish different kinds of discards according to the Four Noble Truths, according to the Abhidhamma Samuccaya, actually the insight into suchness, the first moment of insight into suchness, which is the path of seeing, according to that definition, is only one instant here. It's one moment. So according to the Kosha, there were 16 moments for the gradual progression through the path of seeing. Here now we have one moment. So since it's described as the insight into the true nature of reality, a phenomena, then how can there be a gradual abandonment if we're just talking about one moment here? So that's another opinion about this gradual versus at once kind of question. And then there's yet another explanation of a subgroup of the Chittamatra that say that the path of seeing actually constitutes four moments. So there are 16 moments, 4 moments, or 1 moment to the path of seeing. So that's why I said there are actually 3 different answers depending on who you ask. Kieran kiki 가서 공다 캠불라.
그래서 다 디나라 다 그래서 뭐 컴퓨터나 다왕하다 담문가데 주부 대담제 대시라 체면으로 주대 뭐 컴퓨터는 명도 명령래도 저나라 파피 수비 가젤라 주 가젤라 된 가제제 명도 먹고요래 도와야 또 군질을 분명도 잘하면도 덴바 시절을 찍고 지냐래 동학 통해 방자 주 군중이야 다 당시에 고바야 되라네 라면 되는 되라래 대해서 렐라로 신발에 다운가다 담면가 주고 대담제 대마실을 체면 벌 주그래서
Awesome. Okay, so now we're at paragraph 1086. According to the Abhidhamma Samuccaya, the 10 discards of the 5 beliefs and 5 non-beliefs all apply without distinction to the 4 truths. So here, actually, there's much less of a hassle. According to the Abhidhamma Samuccaya, the kosha was quite problematic. It was quite a headache, right? You had to see which ones apply to which of the 4 noble truths, and like here we had 10. The suffering had 10, and then less for the truth of origination, and so on. Here gets much easier. According to the Abhidhamma Samuccaya, it's just similar for all 4 noble truths on the path of seeing. Each of them has 10 discards. 10 discards to the truth of suffering, 10 discards to the truth of origination, 10 discards to the truth of cessation, and 10 discards to the truth of the path. Easy peasy.
그래서 쪽지는 선문은 렐라로 돌아 쪽지는 선문은 백현사로 돌아와. 그래서 대고 그래서 시에다 배 로가 작성와 방제 쪽지는 방법이 방거를 찍주는 방게 말을 현자도 쓰는 데는 레기요래. 다디 대정한 받은 년도 이제 당원바 진짜지 송다 실자진의 송조요래. 나는 대고 전부 뭔가 송다 실자진의 송조도 데스카가 저도요래. 지게 찍디 년도 연금바 그런 실자지가 보이나 탑당 샤랍당 닝자라서 버지 네바디 로가 여바인데 데 그런 게 반저라다 데스카가 연구요래. 대고 좀 양도 양 방저 봉수나 님발람지 제다 양 로가 잡고요래. 디인도디 현자버양 데네지양 잡고도 와. 나서
So from one perspective, it's just easier. From another perspective, though, it's also very strange. It's a little bit weird what's happening here, because actually it's completely different, right? It's a completely different enumeration of the discards, where sometimes some are abandoned, while in one tradition some are abandoned at a certain point, it's not in another point. So what's going on here? Actually, we need to look at these explanations according to the fact that one follows the path of the Shravakayana, while the other one is the explanation of the Mahayana. And there are differences in those explanations and the paths that are being traversed. So, for example, in the Shravakayana, the topics, the potentials of method and wisdom and compassion are very different to the way that they're emphasized on in the practice of the Mahayana, and that those kinds of differences in method, wisdom, in the topics of method and wisdom, compassion, and so on, those actually then play out in a way that the discards, the things that need to be abandoned, and the way that they are abandoned and when they are abandoned is different to these two traditions.
나 근데 인도 한테가 최종 소소소소지 아니 루스나 면도 저다 데스 면도 용도와 아니 대바 중국 거랑 있나 근데 대우 톱다 있나요? 나 전반면도 수주 몽부세 연결이라 대고 전부 있나요? 다가 나지 양 대우면도 몽부세 연결해 변나 다 견준다고 지를 세 보이나 대고 중국이 견준 지당 희득으로 와 대우찬이 견준 세 보이나 규주 질명 규주 체론 질명 다좀 봐. 그 딘절은 낭차를 다로 낭세 여어 잡아이나 그 왕부 nom보나 뚫보나 레다미르 제선은 견준 이슈 싸지선에 세 연구로 와. 한테고 전부라 아니 견준 아니 사주 사당번에 사주 버들에 파고 견준 온도스에 연구요래. 그 딘조지 도다잖아야 되네. 방자 봉조나 녀몽 가서 녀보 자당다 되잖니. 됐어 제버 죽도고요래.
So actually we need to look at the difference between the Shravakayana and the Mahayana here. And on the presentations of what the noble beings, so the realized beings referred to, is actually different. And accordingly then also the different enumerations will be different. So from the Shravaka perspective, we saw that they present the four results. So they constitute the noble Sangha, the realized Sangha. And that includes the stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, and then the Arhat. So those four levels. But even within these four levels, if we look at it in more detail, then there are different capacities, like the sharper faculties, the less sharper faculty, like those of less sharper faculty, middling faculties, and so on. So if we divide that thoroughly, there's a presentation of 21 stages of the results of the or 21 types of individuums that constitute the Sangha, the noble Sangha. And from the Mahayana perspective, that presentation is very different. When we talk about the noble Sangha in the Mahayana, then those are the beings on the bhumis, from the 1st to the 10th bhumi. And they're also then accordingly, each of the bhumis has their own things that need to be abandoned with the particular antidotes that are applied against those. So these are two completely different presentations of the stages of the results. So let's stop here for today and dedicate the merit.
Sonam de damje zebani tone nebe janam bamjen kega naje balan drobai sebe zole ndowan dolwarajo changjo zemjo remboje maje banam genjoroje Keba nyamba meba yang kongne kondo belwara sho laso kuzo toja nang nazo sanye jaltebe rewa cheko la.
So please everyone stay healthy and take care, and I hope to see you all tomorrow. Laso kempola tuchinang.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I will the I will put the list of these 16 moments to the path of seeing in the notes for today. I think that wasn't entirely clear how I phrased it, but I'll get it to you.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.